Welcome to another episode of Money in the Bank with Frank. Conversations where capital, creativity, and conviction intersect. I tried that one out. That's a new one. Let's see if anyone goes for it. But today we're talking about a very special kind of capital that doesn't just seek returns, but seeks outcomes. My guest today is John Parker from the Charles Hood Foundation. John operates at the intersection of private investing, philanthropy, and pediatric impact. He backs companies and programs that are measurably improving outcomes for children and families. And what makes this conversation like especially timely is that John's also working on new modules that unlock capital that's already been donated, money that's sitting in charitable foundations and donor advice funds, and putting it to work in smarter, more catalytic ways that are impactful. This isn't charity versus investing. This is about alignment, about engineering outcomes with, while respecting fiduciary responsibility. And I think it's where a lot of sophisticated capital is heading next. John.
Yeah. No, what a good intro. I gotta steal that from you for myself. Um, yeah, little background, share a little
Yeah.
bit of,
Yeah. Tell
yes,
me your
so
testimony. Give me your testimony. How did you get here?
yeah. So, yeah, I'm a pediatric-focused investor. I've been doing this, as an investor in this space for a decade now. I've been involved in supporting children's health for closer to 2 decades, about 18 years. 18 years ago, I joined, the board of a foundation here in Boston called the Charles Hood Foundation. Charles Hood was my great-grandfather, so it's a family foundation. And most of what we've done over the life of that foundation, it's 84 years old this year, is to support pediatric researchers. And we do it across all areas of pediatrics, but just trying to improve outcomes for kids using science and innovation and promoting, and supporting the people who, all the really smart people who are doing that work. Um, a little bit into my time there that we saw some gaps in getting these the science and the innovations to patients. And sort of long story short, we ended up setting up a venture fund internally at the foundation. Hit my skill set. I set that up and ran it, and we didn't know what we'd find. There weren't other pediatric investors to look to for guidance around this. We didn't know if there were going to be a lot of deals, but we did know there was a lot of unmet need. So we jumped in, and the fact that we're doing it out of a foundation, sorry, and you alluded to this a little bit, was really cool. We give money away. Like we know how to lose money, right? Yeah. We invest money too, and we do well there. But with the pool of capital that we give away, we're not expecting anything back, except for results. We want impact. So when we took a step back and said, hey, let's think about our investments that way a little bit. And for me as a career investor, to be able to look at this through the lens of let's invest for outcomes, that was just a game-changing way to think about things instead of just the fiduciary piece. So I was given some latitude to experiment and try things out, an incredibly refreshing way to invest. And, everyone's, got to be very careful with their money. And we weren't looking to lose money. We definitely were not. Yeah, that's not going to help anybody if the company goes out of business. But
Right.
we gave ourselves some latitude. And so we set up a venture fund, internal venture fund at the foundation. Drugs, devices, digital health, focused on kids sort of from the time they're born through adolescence. And yeah, fast forward 10 years later, we built a portfolio. We've made 21 investments. We invest really early, so they take some time, and we're patient capital. So 19 of those investments are still going. We want to go out of business. We had an exit, the way it should work. And even through a tough climate, it's been a tough venture climate for the last couple of years. Our companies are surviving and persisting, and not without challenges, but that's the nature of it. And they're building and getting through regulatory processes and doing trials and selling into hospitals, and they're having impact. And some of them are going to be great investments for us from a financial point of view too, but more of them than that are going to have impact. So that's been a great success. So that's the roots of what I do. And go into some of the other things I've been doing, but that was the starting point.
Yeah. Now let's stay on that vein for a second, because I think one of the things that is the alignment seems real because if you think about foundationally and fundamentally and first principles when it comes to humans, like you want the foundation to survive. You want as many children to survive and make it. Um, so if you invest in outcomes for pediatrics, perhaps you have a better population, right? And like it's not necessarily profitable yet because no one's been quantifying it. We've had conversations about how it's just not really it's a niche that was a little unexplored, right? So, um, if you're looking at the base of humans, right, and you're able to make impacts at that base, you have better outcomes hopefully for the humankind, but also you can have returns on those investments because you're getting to the first part of the medical investment.
Yeah.
To
No,
put it,
absolutely.
as a mercenary.
So I think there's a perception out in the marketplace that the returns, the money, the market is at the end of life. Yes, they're older people, and that is where in this country where we spend a lot of money,
Mhm,
especially last months of life and dealing with people when they're really sick. We're good at
mhm,
sick care, and we've invested a lot in that. Yet we look at it, and kids are 25% of the population. They are active users of the healthcare system.
mhm,
If parents want their kids to be healthy, and if they have something wrong, people go to the ends of the earth to solve a kid's problem.
mhm,
They have their whole life in front of them. So you actually, when you think about sort of the net present value of a person's life, when you're investing in their health,
mhm,
doing it early, the upside is amazing. Now, you don't necessarily always capture that financially, but when you think about it just in terms of the value of a person's life, investing early in life, you can't get higher value than doing that. Just the U.S. healthcare system hasn't always been geared towards preventing, taking care of people early, and we're seeing some negative results around that. Yet the opportunity is there now.
mhm,
I think there is more and more interest in taking care of people early, preventative care, precision medicine, all these terms you hear. And
mhm,
just over the last decade, I've seen a significant uptick in the number of people starting to explore this underserved pediatric area, saying this is really
mhm,
interesting because yes, it's a decent sized part of the population. We don't
mhm,
spend as much there now, but maybe we should be spending more in the early years, a little less in the later years, and so you get a bit of this shift. That says opportunity to me, and that's one of the reasons why is I really got into this when, and again, I started doing it out of a foundation. Didn't know what we'd find. Maybe we'd find no good investments.
mhm,
We found something quite opposite, and they are very different. And I started getting a huge number of deals through the door, some really exciting things, and that led me to set up, spin out my own for-profit fund. There is a
mhm,
ton of opportunity out there. Um, Again, life science and healthcare. It's hard. There's just no two ways about it. But it is the reward at the end is massive, both in terms of you can get great economics, but also the impact you can have. And to me, well, and I'm biased. I get it.
yeah.
The earlier you go, the greater the impact.
Well, let's talk about a couple of things there. You don't just invest in those deals. You actually work with a pretty um, well-recognized institution that is able to help validate some of this technology that you're investing in, right? So it's not like just the John Parker Foundation sending some people out that might not even be, able to suss out whether or not there's an addressable market or there's a need, right?
We are fortunate. When we've been around for a long time, we've got some good mechanisms within the foundation. So we have, and I don't take credit for it. It was designed years ago, but we have a system around a scientific review committee of some of it's a who's list of people in pediatrics, and it rotates all the time. So we keep getting new people in. We have amazing scientists, both research, clinical people who come and help us figure out how to find great science. That
Mhm,
doesn't always help with when you're investing in a company, the management of the company, but at least it gives us that good foundation for investing in whether it's the science around a drug, the engineering with a medical device, whatever it is, or understanding the clinical need out there.
mhm,
I'm very lucky that I can tap into amazing resources there, and that's just internal. We've also, we have all these other resources at our disposal. We do a lot of early career grants, and we have people who've gone on to become leaders in, across all specialties in pediatrics. They tend to be very thankful for those early grants, and they've been incredibly helpful. They pick up the phone when we call and help us understand some of the investments we're looking at and what the challenges are. And they'll work with some of them. You will even work with the companies on their scientific advisory boards to help
Mhm.
them understand how to build their company and fit into
And how to be
workflow.
sustainable, right? How to monetize, how to be
Yep,
sustainable.
yep,
You don't wanna stifle the innovation, but you also have to make sure that the company is actually able to stand on its own,
yeah.
2 feet. To that, do you underwrite more to, the outcome or the science, the team, or the pathway to adoption? How do you kind of if you really even think of it in those terms?
Yeah, I think about it in many ways as a typical venture investor around these things, and look at when once you're investing in a company, and I always need a company there. I peers who will invest just in an asset, or and maybe they'll build the company around it.
Okay.
I'm not doing that at this point. So I'm really focused on the team, and you hear this, about people investing in startup companies, team, team, team. And for me, it's very much the team right now. There may be a founding team. You need them to get it off the ground, and then you need to go to a commercial team later
Mhm,
on. But I focus very much around that. I'm somebody who thinks about the entire journey. I mentioned at the beginning how we were trying to fill gaps in getting science and innovation to patients
mhm,
and to
mhm,
kids. What is that? How are you thinking through that entire journey? Everything from, yes, how you're designing whatever it is, how are you doing the clinical trials, what's the regulatory process, to who's going to sell it? Well, how does this fit into the day-to-day life of the people who are using it? Is this something that is compatible with other solutions out there?
mhm,
Is it affordable? Is it not? Yeah, all these questions. And if you're not thinking about those things really early on,
mhm.
you could miss something and end up wasting a lot of time and money for something that actually may not ultimately work because you missed one of these variables. So I think those are fairly typical sort of venture investor approaches, and we think about all of those things, but we do keep that science, the science and technology, and thinking about how to help the patient
Mhm.
at at the front end of everything we do, because it's not
Yeah,
just
trying
about.
to get something to standard of care is like that's the whole point, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's hard work.
Mm,
So you really have to think it through, and I see a lot of and talk to a lot of academic founders who are like, "I know there's a need, and I've got my widget or whatever that can hit that need." And it's like, you're so far away from figuring out how to actually get it there. So, but also,
yeah,
let's try to help you figure it out. If we can
yeah.
do that, and we can't do it with all of them, but a lot of them, you can figure it out. You just
Mhm.
takes a lot of time and effort. So,
That's
um,
great. And
where
and you came from what was really interesting is you came from the again, from a foundation, from a philanthropic organization, and were able to make that transition from and this is what I found really compelling last time we talked. It's like you were able to actually make a jump from something that was originally just, nonprofit, not for profit, investing and, granting money to organizations that were 501(c)(3)s or something, but you've actually found a way to, again, make it sustainable because again, you generally want a foundation is going to run out at some point. Or is it? In this case, doesn't sound like it has to.
No, and we've got a very dedicated group of trustees around our foundation who want to keep this going. We think we don't see child health problems ending. There are going to be
Oof.
needs there for a long, long time. Because we evolve and maybe we solve one problem, one area, but there will be more. It's sort of
Yeah.
as long as we got kids and as long as we're human, there will be issues we have to deal with. This is
Yeah.
the nature of it. So we want to stick around.
One of the things that I think is really interesting again is like, we started talking about this. I had a client at the end of the year that needed to donate some money. And I was trying to find a home for it, right? And we had talked in the past, and I remembered that you had the foundation, but there wasn't the donor advised fund idea yet, kind of like incorporated. I think the thing that I found fascinating was that, like you've got so many of these investors or clients that have these donor advised funds with a lot of money in them, and they haven't found their charity of choice yet. They haven't found what they want for impact, and so, occasionally Fidelity or Schwab comes and taps at the door and says, "You haven't donated money in a couple of years. Do something." Well, the whole idea is to have it just sitting in there, but actively working, and I think people would be really interested in this opportunity to be able to invest donor-advised money into a vehicle that would show impacts like that, and
Yeah.
that's what, we were talking about last time that I
Yeah,
was trying.
yeah, no, and so let me get so the way we got into this and the my thinking around donor advised funds and such came a little later because we're the foundation, we don't need a donor advised fund. We are our own
Right, right, right,
nonprofit.
right.
But so one of the things that I did when I first started thinking about these ideas, in trying to understand what foundations could do and what they couldn't do, I think we'd always lived in this world where, our thinking was we give money away and then we have an endowment bit that is just invested in the stock market, and it was just, got to be, to have a fiduciary perspective on it. And there's nothing in between. But I discovered what I shared with you before was the program related investment rules. So we call them
Mhm,
PRIs. And most foundations aren't even aware that that this rule exists. And we certainly weren't when we first discovered the PRI rules, a dozen years ago. But these rules, they allow a private foundation to use some of their charitable capital. So the money we put into grants normally, we can put those into a commercial investment, a for-profit enterprise. The deal is that we can't do it for the purpose of making money, meaning it can't if it were going to be a fiduciary investment, if it belonged in that other fiduciary bucket, we shouldn't do it here.
mhm,
It needs to align with both charitable purpose and our mission. And there are a couple other little rules around it, but that's basically it. It's like, is it going to further your mission? Does it fit the IRS definition of charitable use? And are we doing it not to make money, but to, in our case, improve health outcomes for kids? There's no restriction on making money. It's just the intent of doing it. And so for us, it made complete sense. Like we're a fairly conservative investor. So the idea that we were going into these pre-seed and seed stage pediatric companies, as I said, nobody had done this. People were generally thought it's such a small market. It's not an area that you're going to be making a lot of money in. Like, great, we can do this. We can use charitable capital. And if the m- if we don't get any returns back, but we've funded good science and maybe we've had some impact, fantastic. It looks like a
mhm,
grant and we can think about it as a grant.
mhm,
If it really works and the company does well, wow, we can recycle some money back into the foundation to go and support the next thing, either as a grant or another investment. And this idea of recycling capital that's philanthropic capital, so you can do a good again and again and again, is really powerful to me. And
mhm,
maybe we have a home run that
mhm.
gets us a lot of money. Maybe we get an investment that just gets our principal back.
Mhm.
Those are both great outcomes because I can put the
Yeah,
money to work again and
it
solve
it
another problem.
it appears to me like it's a free call option because you were going to use that money, you were gonna donate that money to a charitable organization for some purpose. Now you're able to do that. It unlocks money and capital right now, and you may have upside into your charitable organization or your entity to do the job again, right?
Yeah,
Because the whole idea
absolutely.
behind charitable organizations is to continue to serve that charity or continue to serve that purpose. But it's just such a tremendous amount of money in donor advised funds that are doing nothing other than investing in the market, and I think that this is just a really novel way of getting um, more of that charitable money out there, I think.
Right. I agree, and I think, it's a huge opportunity, with as you mentioned, the huge sums of money that are sitting in donor advised funds where, yes, you could give it away to whatever charity is out there, and that's great to support those charities, but if you're not gonna do it right now, having that money sitting in just a, standard index fund or a money market fund would really doing not that much. Whereas
Mhm.
if you could put that money to work in an investment, and do multiple investments. It's not just one. You still have to be smart with a portfolio. But if you
Mhm.
have an allocation to a number of different companies or a fund or something that gives you a good shot of recycling those funds, wow,
Mhm.
you can maybe have your money sit in a donor advised fund for 10, 15 years through your life, or maybe you keep adding to it. But that money can keep doing well. And ultimately, you can still give it away to that original institution you might have thought of giving it to. But it's done a lot of good in the meantime. And maybe it's even grown because you've gotten some good returns on it that are maybe venture level returns as opposed to money market or fairly, vanilla mutual funds.
So let's pivot for a moment and let's say that you accidentally get OpenAI money in that, foundation that family foundation that you created, right? And all of a sudden, your foundation's worth 9 figures. At that point, you could technically then create a business that actually did pay family members, right? Family foundation type of money, which, isn't a bad thing. Who doesn't want to be a Teddy Roosevelt and have that kind of a foundation?
Right. Right. It's so we like our foundation, we've got that. I'm lucky my grandfather was able to set up a foundation named after his father. We don't pay family members, which is, that's sort of the way we do it. And some people do, some people don't. But yeah, but it's still out there. And sometimes maybe it's about getting your family and your kids or your grandkids involved in something that actually does have, a way to help support them a little bit. Some of it's just about the legacy. And it's interesting. Uh, I know some I have a friend who does this, and she has access to a lot of donor advised fund money, but she doesn't have her own foundation. But one of the things at this point in her life is thinking about is she invests a lot of that money because she's trying to build that up. And ultimately, I think she would love to convene the money from, and she's got a couple different donor advised funds, but convene it, get returns, grow those donor advised funds, and leave a legacy to her kids with an actual private foundation,
Right. Right.
rather than donor advised fund, which and that works if the kids want to do it and all of that. But right now there's some flexibility, but wow, really powerful idea to figure out how to grow it while having impact all the way through.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's an interesting model. She's very forward thinking with that.
Yeah, and that's gonna be the 1% of the 1% of the people that set up a donor advised fund. These are gonna be like outlier type of opportunities, not to be expected, but you never know. You never know, right? Uh,
A
I
lot of
just
people
think
have
it's
done it. So
Oh, there you go. I just think it's just really interesting. I can't believe that it's taken this long. And as you know, I only got into understanding more and more about the pediatric needs and capital when I started working with that organization down here in Texas. But uh, it just blows me away that instead of like begging and asking for research money, that there's all of this money that probably is available and just there was no access to it or anybody talking about, the need for money in pediatric research and how donor advised fund money could actually, be used for that. So, I just wanted to get that out there to the financial community to let them know that, like, don't forget that, like, that money should be used for something. And if you're gonna leave that charity money to, like, XYZ organization, maybe this is a better alternative is giving it away while you're alive, right?
yeah. One of the things that I think about when people are making choices with their, hard-earned money, and they'll invest it and do well and try to leave, you know, either say, they're going to put it into a nice house or their car or their boat or leave it to their kids, but they're also giving it away too. And when people make those choices, um, on the investment side, I think most of the world thinks in these two buckets we talked about. I have my bucket that makes money. I have my bucket I give it away. To be able to think about it with sort of a mixed approach, and whether it's a donor advised fund or just through an investment account, and say, hey, look, I've got some money. It's having the charitable purpose. I don't. Maybe it's a little riskier. Maybe it takes a little longer, but maybe it's not going to do as well as my investment in whatever AI company.
Mhm.
Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But it's doing good. And so instead of just getting the tax deduction of the philanthropic bit, maybe you can get a pretty good return that's, again, you can have just as much impact as the philanthropy, but you can do a lot better than just a tax deduction. So I try to encourage people to think about that too, because there's so many different ways people think about it, whether it's, again, you get a charity, you give it away, you have philanthropic investment. You can do
Mhm,
that with money that is, you've gotten a tax deduction for it. You can't take that money and put it back in your own pocket, but you can build a foundation out of it.
mhm,
Or
mhm,
maybe you want to have impact with your taxable money and it's just a little but it allows you to think about risk and returns a little bit differently.
mhm.
And you do that alongside the rest of your portfolio where you're going to go out and crush it, right?
That's right, that's right. I had a conversation with one of my business partners earlier in the week, and we were talking about one of the portfolio investments that, we're expecting a return on, and how, whether or not to fund it using qualified or non-qualified money, and coming up with ideas, and I forgot how charitably inclined my partner was, and he was like, "I'm just gonna donate it to, my gains to XYZ anyway." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot." That's just another opportunity for him to, like, you know, maybe use donor advised money, because I know he has a donor advised fund, so maybe that's an option as well.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I just think it's just it's a, I think, an untapped creative place that companies like Fidelity might consider. Have you considered creating maybe an Act 40 type fund, or something that like the charitable institutions could invest a sleeve in, like, instead of just a Fidelity fund, that maybe there'd be a philanthropic fund based on this type of idea?
So I haven't set up one myself. I have a good friend and know a couple of people who have set up
Yep.
mechanisms to allow people to do this to invest into funds. So they're sort of the intermediary for me. I have
Yeah.
not gone so far as to set up my own nonprofit fund vehicle. Yeah, that's a little. Would I do it at some point? Maybe, but you need to have some scale to it. Setting up your own nonprofit has some expense, and you
Right.
need to. Yeah, there's reporting, and you need to hire people around that. So that's a little bit bigger ask when you actually can get money in. So, like my fund, I've got a traditional limited partnership. This thing I spun out of the foundation for the to do the later stage pediatric things that I think are going to be the ones that make, you know, the good returns and all that. But even in that fund, which is a traditional limited partnership, I have some taxable and limited partners in it, and I have two donor advised funds who came into it. So they coexist very easily in that vehicle, which is ideal. And the the investors, the limited partners, they
Yeah.
just have different perspectives on risk, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are comfortable with it in their taxable account. Some of them, no, this is a better place for me because
This is
I've got my my Goldman Sachs investment manager, and he's never gonna put money into this stuff, so I do it through my donor advised fund or whatever the
right.
case may be.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, I mean, at the end of the day, when the company that needs the money gets a check, they don't care. They just want the check, right? And so, like, the vehicle can be set up in a way that, like, is GPLP, typical GPLP um, setup. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter as long as it doesn't violate the different rules, right? So, yeah, that does seem to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and yeah, people forget
You're gonna
sometimes you
need
need.
you're gonna need you're gonna need someone that really understands it, and you're gonna have a firm that understands the accounting behind it, but,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's
I
possible. It's possible for
yeah,
all
absolutely.
for a lot of the sophisticated investors out there that invest in venture capital or private equity. This is something for them to consider, because, like, if you have your own foundation, and you're used to investing in the private markets or donating, use that donor advised fund money, you know,
Yeah.
in private investing as well.
Well,
But
and that's why it's helpful to work with one of these groups that has done all that groundwork, and they've done the legwork on the legal side, and they will set up a donor advised fund for you, and they'll vet the investment, do all the things, take all the steps they need to do legally to make sure that it is an allowed investment,
yeah,
for those entities. So there are people who do that.
yeah,
It's the same way with our foundation. We went through before we made our first investment. We did a lot of diligence, and we spent sort of a year working with lawyers to understand just what we were allowed to do and what we weren't. I don't think it probably took a year, but there weren't a lot of examples out there then. There are some more now. Yet I know and talk to people in foundations on a fairly regular basis who are exploring this, and everybody wants to get legal comfort with it, and that's smart. I mean, you do that with your taxable account too. Like,
Right.
is this a legitimate entity? You're going to have your lawyers review the LP agreements and all of these things, because
Mhm.
that's what we do to make sure we're making a smart and sound investment.
Right. And can you talk about any exits that you've had as far as like, whether standard of care or like successful exits? Like, what have you guys invested in that actually has been
Yes.
great?
We had so I will say, like, the last couple of years in venture has been tough to find those exits. There that no hiding from that, and
Yeah.
across the life science and healthcare space. Early in that, we had a nice medical device company out in California, came out of, a group at Stanford called Stanford Biodesign. Very, relatively straightforward, simple medical device. Based on it is, an umbilical catheter securement device.
Ooh,
Sounds really sexy, right? It just is. The catheter in the newborn babies, they put the catheter where, yeah, the belly button is, and it's very hard to hold it there. It gets infected, it comes loose, all these things, and they invented something to hold it securely so mom can hold her baby when it's in without it getting dislodged and infected. Super simple. But
yeah.
it's still a long process. It's a medical device. They got it approved, and ended up they signed a distributor arrangement with a group that ended up putting an offer on the table, and they bought the company, and had an initial payment, some milestone payments, and it's a great success story. For something, it's a very simple medical device.
Mhm.
We've got some others that are in conversation right now. Super excited. We've another company on the medical device side that's just got what's called a de novo approval.
Oh,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you may be the audience. I don't know if it's familiar. You want to think about a medical device. There are two sort of main pathways for approval. One is
510K.
the
Yeah. The more,
510K,
yeah.
which means somebody else has done it and you're just doing it better, but it's not a new mousetrap. It's
Mhm,
just a better mousetrap. De
mhm.
novo, it's totally new. It's something that doesn't exist. That's an extensive process. It goes
And
through the FDA.
expensive, right? It's a long process,
Yeah.
extensive, and if you make some missteps, you might be, yeah,
Yeah. And so we have a company that just got a de novo approval, and it's really interesting. You
Right.
get that, industry starts calling. They're very interested in the de novo thing. So, I think it's a question of we're I think in the driver's seat with that a bit, and can decide exactly when we want to exit for maximum value. But those conversations are going really it's super exciting stuff right now. And yeah, we've got the biotech things. One of the challenges is just completing clinical trials, and you need some of the fuel to keep those things going. So a lot of the industry, I think our portfolio may be moving a little slower than we'd like, but they'll
But
get there.
you could just drop it into the LLM now, and it can do all that testing for you. You don't have to wait anymore. You could just, like, right, you know?
Right. And then just give it to kids. No, we're not going to do that. It's still the work needs to be done. One of the cool things about my focus area is that a lot of the pediatric things are rare, and the needs that we're looking at are some of the highest unmet needs. The
Mhm.
FDA has been a great partner on these, and so it allows us to typically in the things that I invest in, we're looking for opportunities to do relatively small clinical trials because they're small patient populations,
Populations, yeah.
and the FDA will give us whether it's through breakthrough designations or other mechanisms, allow us to accelerate trials so we can do it faster and cheaper, basically.
For sure.
That's a great investment story. If
Mhm.
we can get a drug approved faster and cheaper than in the adult markets, wow, that's great. And a
Mhm.
lot of these things would then have potential in adult indications as well. So I love
Right.
that story when I can find it, and we're working on a bunch of those. And we're starting to get some drag. The market seems to slowly be picking up a little bit, because at some point, after a tough couple of years in venture and healthcare and life sciences, people are still interested. The science is still amazing, and there are good deals on the table now. So they're starting to get done a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
we just closed a deal in a rare disease that got sort of a first close on a deal that, frankly, a big part of the reason it got done is because the valuation's really compelling right now. So
Mhm. That's what I was gonna say is that I bet because it's not a crowded market, the valuations are probably fairly reasonable as well.
yes, and that look, there are two sides to that coin. And with the existing portfolio, you see down rounds
You gotta wait.
occasionally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We had a couple, not too bad, but we had two that, again, I'm a little less concerned. Those were both in the foundations portfolio, so I'm a little less concerned. They're going to have a huge impact, and if we take a bit of a hit on our economics, I'm going to be fine with that. I don't want that in the fund so much
Yeah,
in my fund,
yeah.
but in my fund, which is newer and just sort of getting going on that, we're finding some really compelling valuations, and that's good. There's, again, like I said, there's always another side to the story. It's painful for somebody often, but I think there was a need to right set this market. I think there were a lot of
Yeah.
valuations that were out of control. So we're seeing that happen, and that's healthy.
I like the idea of a for gain not for profit to continue to fuel innovation, right? Yeah, because that's the thing is like one of the things that I worry about across some of the investments in our portfolio. We've got some biotech and we've got some plant tech investments. Um, and again, it was like, these are relatively small investments because the valuation's pretty low and the capital needs are pretty low, but they're huge on like food production. If you get one of those, it's amazing, right? But um, nobody's been looking at it. Nobody's been, paying attention to it. The margins aren't really that compelling. But again, you're getting a shot at something that is fundamental, food, right? Same thing. You're looking at something um, that's in a market that's really compelling, children, right? And the impacts there for very small changes are huge, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to invest in those um, something that might, if you have a better than not thought that it's actually gonna do really well, of course, you would want it to be something that was able to continue the journey for the rest of the foundation and portfolio. So for gain, not for profit,
Yeah.
right?
No, I love it. I love it. That's absolutely right. And again, I think about, how do you improve the lives of people early in their lives? And I say this a lot, like, it's not just kids. It's not just
Mhm,
pulling the heartstrings. These are people. And we
mhm.
talk about, you're improving their health early in life, but these are people who you hope will go on to become, our, our workers, our business people, our military, our soldiers, our leaders. And why aren't we, as a country, why aren't we being, yes, putting everything into our, the people who will get the work done in this country in the future? It's going to make us more competitive. So again, I get my soapbox with that stuff.
On the this is really just a question that, like, bothers me and keeps me up at night sometimes, seriously, is, like, all of the technology that, you look at that you see that maybe you've invested in that, like, goes to 0, but not because of, because the technology was wrong, but because maybe execution risk at the management level or whatever. Do you keep track of, the technology that you guys have invested in and that you may own, in the off chance that in the future a different portfolio company might be able to bring that further? Or have you seen any of that?
So we've had that conversation. So we've had one company go under out of our foundation's portfolio, only one, and we've had a lot of conversation around, okay, what happens to that technology? And we, at least at a minimum, we don't need to keep it. I don't want to lock it up because I don't know that we'll ever be able to do anything with it, or another shareholder. Um, we were able to we essentially made it open source.
Mhm.
Somebody else can pick up
I
that
like that.
technology
Yeah, I like
and
that.
just
That's
improve
good.
it. Um, we've also had a lot of conversations around, and we're not there on it. I know other groups have, but when this goes in even into the grand stuff. But if you're developing technology and say it fails too, like, are you sharing the knowledge around that? Are you helping other people with those failures? We all talk about the wins, and the wins, and they get there. But what about all the other stuff that either it doesn't get there because maybe it works, and the management team couldn't get it done, or maybe it didn't work, but there's knowledge there. How do
Mhm.
you get that out there? It's a really tough thing. Whether it's in academia or it's in industry, it's a tough one.
Mhm.
We're we think about that every time.
Mhm.
And the more complicated the technology, the more you have to think about it.
Yeah.
So,
'Cause I've had some losers, but, like, every single time I get notified that, like, somebody's looking for work on LinkedIn, I'm like, "Uh-oh, that's not good," right? And I just think to myself, I'm like, I'm not a big enough investor that it really matters, but I'd hate I didn't invest in it because I thought it was gonna be a loser, and so, like, what happens to that tech? And, if you're a real small investor, you can't do anything, but makes me think over and over when it's something to do with, academia or something that is valuable based on just its research. I just hate seeing that dead asset not,
yeah.
add value to somebody somehow, and it's frustrating.
And this is
Commercial
why
side, it's like, okay, fine, but, like, these are sometimes impactful, mostly impactful types of
the
investments.
this is why I'm comfortable with those down rounds when we get there. Like, I'd rather it go through a tough down round and have somebody else end up with some, yeah, the better economics around it as long as it keeps moving forward. I I don't want the down round, but again, and I'll point it. We do have a company in the portfolio, global health company, and global health's tough. But this company is having huge impact. Uh, they've touched millions of lives through a fairly easy to distribute um, technology that's on a phone. It's essentially like doctor on a phone, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
data around it and everything, reaching a lot of people. Company just couldn't raise the money. I think leadership issues, et cetera, that got in the way of them raising the money they needed to expand the way they wanted. Whatever they, yeah, won't go too far in the weeds on it. Another group came in and said, "Look, we're willing to take this on. We want three-quarters of the company to do it, and we'll go out and continue it. We'll fund it, but this is, yeah, we're getting three-quarters of the company for it." That's a huge hit to take.
Mhm.
That group took the company. They're reaching twice as many people as before, and they've raised money. So God
Yeah.
bless them. Like, that's, I didn't want it, but the other alternative for this company was to shut down.
Yeah.
So we'll take that, and they are impacting lives all over the world. It's a win.
Yeah. That's
I don't want
the
it.
no, yeah, well,
Yeah,
no capital allocator wants to see a loss like that, but it's also, it could have been a donut. Could have
right.
been 0,
And
right? Could have been
yeah,
0, and then the technology and all of the cognitive and emotional and actual equity that you put into it goes to 0. That no
yeah.
it's no yeah.
And there's a decent chance we get our money back. And again, that fit really well for the foundation. And it's global
Mm,
health. You have global health stuff. It's good in the foundation. Not likely to put that into the for-profit fund.
yeah,
Global health has its own unique challenges, but for the foundation, that's great. And again, I think there's a really good shot we get our principal back, and we can put that
yeah,
money to work again. It doesn't mean I'm not getting the 5 to 10x that I might have expected originally.
yeah,
But it's okay. It's okay.
yeah. That's awesome. Well, John, I truly appreciate the time you gave me today. Uh Look
Thanks for
forward
having.
to yeah, and I look forward to, continuing the discussion as the charitable idea kinda comes more into fruition because I know that I'm interested in trying to figure out how to make that work. So I look
Yeah.
forward to talking to you more about it.
We will do that. I've loved this conversation. If listeners wanna learn more about it, happy to talk to them too.
Yeah, and how could people get in touch with you? Like, I'm sure we'll throw some stuff in the show notes as well.
Right. Yes. LinkedIn is a great way to get me.
Great.
And I've got a website, springhood.com. So
Perfect.
there are ways to get through to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, John. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Frank, been a pleasure.